Welcome to Paradigm Playbook, the podcast on the business of sports. With 50 plus years of experience, Steve Cook shares insights weekly, featuring top playmakers shaping the industry. Get ready to script your next play. Now, here's your host.
Hello and welcome to Paradigm Playbook. I'm your host, Steve Cook, alongside Matthew Becker. Matthew Becker is owner and founder of Gym Lawyers PLLC. We'll get into the differences and all that, but Matthew is a lawyer to the sports world and has helped many of our gymnastics clients, but can help any of our clients and any of you out there with legal questions about your business. And we're going to dig into just some of the most common. Matthew will also be presenting at the Signature Business Workshop in December in Orlando that you're going to hear more about. Matthew, you want to take a minute and first of all, welcome, and I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit better than I did.
Oh, thanks, Stephen. I thought you did a fantastic job, but thanks for having me on the show here. It's a real pleasure. So as you said, my name is Matthew Becker. I'm the owner and lead attorney of Gym Lawyers PLLC. By definition, we're like the leading legal consulting firm for legal compliance in the fitness industry. That's just a bunch of like legal buzzwords that just basically say like, we help gym owners make sure they're avoiding lawsuits. We got started in this we're going on close to 4 years. We hit 4 years in November. So we're getting pretty close to 4 years. And I had a background as a gym owner of a CrossFit gym for 11 years. And I've been in the fitness industry for quite a long time. Kind of blended the two back in a few years ago to bring legal compliance because there just wasn't anybody that was able to talk to gym owners. And gym is sort of like a misnomer because it's just, like you said, anybody in the fitness industry, some sort of exercise that we just needed to help them because they don't know what they don't know within like, what's the legal side of my business like?
And the marketplace for that is so much bigger. Some people may think you're limiting yourself, but to the contrary, like my world is structured around gymnastics facilities, and there's 6,000 of those alone, probably 40,000 karate studios. So it's a huge market. There's a lot of work to do out there. Our one cross connection is CrossFit. I like to say I was a victim of CrossFit for about 5 years until my old body couldn't take it anymore. But such a fun concept and how that grew. It was very interesting. If we just start by saying just a couple of the simple things that if someone's starting a new business in the sports world, just kind of a checkpoint, here's things you ought to pay attention to.
Yeah, sure. So anytime we talk to somebody new who's like, I want to start something, a CrossFit gym, a gymnastics studio, a cheerleading, swim school, whatever it is, we say that you are essentially in the green light stage. And so the green light stage is like, this is no longer a dream. This is no longer just a thought. This is like, it's happening. And so we've just green lighted the process to open up this business. From there, from our perspective on the legal side, we now essentially put you through 3 different phases. And these are sort of like the 3 phases that we think the new business owner needs to know about in order before they open day 1. They can talk with you about setting up from the business side, but first thing, as soon as you greenlight that this is going to happen, you file a legal entity, and commonly known as like your corporation or your limited liability company. From there, everything after that is done in the name of that corporate entity. And I can like go into the weeds why, but like just kind of broad-based stuff here. That's phase 1. So we want to do that first. Phase 2, assuming that you're going to be in a brick and mortar location, you're going to find your physical location. Phase 2 is all dedicated to the lease review, the negotiation, making sure you understand what's in that sometimes 65-page document of legal paragraphs that are a page and a half long that make no sense whatsoever. And then we go into phase 3, which is liability waivers, insurance, membership agreements, or tuition agreements, however you want to talk about like your monthly recurring payments, staff agreements, things like that, making sure that we've got everything papered we need to protect that gym owner on day 1 and then moving forward.
I think sometimes business owners and those of us on the business side of things kind of shy away from legal questions. We think they're going to go away if we don't pay attention to them. If they don't. I tell everybody, and I'm sure I read this in a book somewhere, but there's some key people that you need to get to know before you ever sign a loan document. You should have a relationship with a lawyer, with a banker, with an accountant. You should have those basic partners in line. And I'm saying you don't have to hire them. You don't even have to put them on retainer, but you should know who they are. If nothing else, take a lawyer out to lunch. So go back to to phase one within
Sure.
the green light stage. It's a question that I hear all the time. Should I be a corporation? Should be an S corporation? Should I be an LLC? Or should be a PLLC? I was confirming his business and I didn't understand what a PLLC is. For those of us who aren't up to speed, could you fill us in on that?
Sure. So just basically a PLLC is short for a professional limited liability company, and different states are going to have different rules around PLLCs, but the general gist is states are going to say if you're providing a professional service, usually doctor, physical therapist, dietitians, sometimes like massage therapists, attorneys, that we can't just be regular LLCs. We have to be professional limited liability companies. From a legal standpoint, what is the difference? Doesn't make not much. From a state standpoint, they get to charge us more money for it.
Okay, so let's now differentiate LLC from like an S corporation or a C corporation in terms of either tax liability or liability protection. How do you define that in today's world?
All right, so the general idea is that we want our legal entity to cover us personally. So the whole idea of this is that we're opening up a business. Regardless of the type of business we're opening, we are now exposing ourselves to liability. So generally, us as individuals, we're going to have three primary assets. We're going to have a house, we're going to have a car, and we're going to have a bank account. We may expand beyond that, like as we make more and more money. You might get like a beach house, you might get investment accounts, those sorts of things. But those are your three basic. Whenever we open a business, we don't want a lawsuit to come through the business, force us to sell our house, force us to sell our car, or garnish our bank account. So in order to protect against that, we create a legal entity. The only two, and again, I shouldn't say only because there are others that we're not really concerned about. The only two that we're really concerned about as far as legal entities are concerned to protect our personal assets are limited liability companies and corporations. So when you say S Corp, C Corp, those are just tax designations for the corporation itself. In the end, it's just a corporation, okay? Sometimes known as a closely held corporation, but corporation. All right. Once we set those up, there are legal formalities that have to be maintained if we want to maintain the individual personal asset protection that comes with this legal shield of a corporate entity. The problem with corporations, especially if it's just like one or two of us, maybe we're partners, maybe we've got like a husband and wife team, corporations are super formal. They're usually meant to be really big. We have a bunch of investors, we have a bunch of shareholders, we set up a board of directors and officers, and we have bylaws. And if we screw one of these things up, we've just given that hole for an attorney to poke a little hole into to say, you haven't treated the corporation formally. So we're going to pierce the corporate veil and get underneath that protection, that liability shield, and get at your stuff, your personal assets. Okay. In exchange of that, or instead of that, we usually just use limited liability companies, LLC. They provide the same legal protection with less formality. Okay, so a lot easier to maintain, a lot harder to pierce. And we can tax designate an LLC the same as we can tax designate a corporation. So we don't even get any tax advantages for going over a corporation than we do an LLC.
So if you're generating a profit with the LLC and paying yourself dividends, is that taxed as a corporation and then it goes into your personal income and taxed again?
So no, it's not. So by its definition, nature, as soon as we file an LLC, it's taxed as what's considered a sole proprietorship or disregarded entity. Same things, just depends on who you talk to, how cool they want to talk about like disregarded entities. But what that basically means is the IRS, when you're being taxed, just doesn't even look at the LLC. It disregards it, and it taxes you as a self-employed individual. So every dollar that comes in, you pay self-employment taxes on that dollar, which is fine until you hit a certain revenue threshold and you bump up into the next tax bracket. At that point, an accountant is typically going to recommend that you redesignate that LLC for tax purposes as an S corporation, which allows you to pay yourself as a member of the LLC as an employee, reducing the amount of taxes you're paying on your distributions. There's some tax advantages there. Very rarely would you ever tax an LLC as a C corporation. There are very specific instances where we would, but usually that means like you're like big, you're making tons of money, and there are tax advantages then. But generally speaking, once you hit C corporation, that's the double taxation. We never really that big. We want to avoid that double taxation.
I'm thinking of primarily my clients, which are
Mm-hmm.
small startups. They're starting, a gym school, a swim school, a karate studio, those things.
Yep.
Their initial gross revenues is like a $500,000 business, growing to anywhere to 500,000 to 10 million, in that range. So they're still considered small businesses. So in general, do you think an LLC is appropriate for most of those?
100%. Our recommendation would be go with an LLC. Leave it as a disregarded entity until you hit like that $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 gross revenue. And then your accountant's probably going to say, okay, let's bump this thing into an S corporation. Once you get over $1 million, that may now look like it's some good reason to go for a C corporation, but that's more of the accountant lane than the attorney lane. I can just kind of talk about this stuff and say terms. And then once you start getting in the weeds there, I'm like, I'll call my CPA on that one.
We consultants, we talk around all of these topics and we try to give no real advice on any of them.
Right.
So I kind of say, listen, my role as a consultant is to tell you what questions to ask. I'm not the one to answer them. There's different effects when you go to sell the business too in the structure. If you're going to end up paying a corporate tax on selling it or a capital gains tax for what you take personally, I think there are ways that you can,
allocate the taxes, allocate the purchase price to different classes of taxation, which is going to differentiate how you're taxed on that sale. Yes. That's a big thing of what you guys do and what Third Level does with their brokerage. And then we have a brokerage as well for adult fitness centers. You guys have, child activity centers. So we do talk tax allocation a lot with our clients, but that's also a big thing of consideration.
We try to get everybody that regardless of where you are, the sooner you can talk about your exit strategy. If you go into it thinking and knowing the ramifications of your structure, then you can plan ahead and you know where to put your assets. And we don't have a lot, but a percentage of our clients buy their own building. If you're buying versus renting, what questions might I ask you then?
A big concern from our perspective, if you're buying your building, is to make sure that we're buying the building separately from essentially the fitness business. So if I open up a fitness business, let's just call it Matt's Gym LLC. I'm renting, and then eventually I grow to the point where I want to buy my building. A common mistake is to then use Mike's Gym LLC to buy the building. We don't want to do that, okay? Because the building is a massive asset now and is probably a bigger asset perhaps than the gym itself. Okay. And so if the gym's going to get sued, we don't want to expose that building asset to the lawsuit that comes at the gym. So what we do is we open up a second LLC, another legal entity. Sometimes this can be referred to as a holding company, but we then use that LLC to buy the building. So we have the building that's owned by one LLC. We have the gym that's owned by another LLC. Then we do a lease agreement back and forth. And that way, the gym can take that as an expenditure on paying rent. The building LLC can take that as rental income, sometimes can be taxed a little bit differently. And we've separated an isolated liability between the two. So that's a big consideration when somebody wants to go buy the building.
I deal a lot with the SBA. And the SBA is very understanding of sister companies and a holding company and an operating company going together. But it opens up your options. Aside from the taxing, it opens up your options when you're ready to sell, because there's a lot more people that can afford your business that can't afford your building.
That's right.
And it may give you a retirement strategy
Passive
to where
income.
you retain the building, you set a rent where that's creating income, gives you a life. Someone else gets to have the joy of running the gym. If you can afford the building, real estate's still a good investment. There's people out there saying, always rent, but it's been good to me. And most of my growth in equity over the years in my home and in my businesses has been the real estate. And when you look at the companies, and you would know better than I, but I'm told that some of the fitness companies like LA Fitness is a real estate company that has gyms, or maybe it was Planet Fitness or one of them, that their main interest, and McDonald's, their main interest is real estate. So that all happens. Let me jump over to, there's some other little things. They're little in that sometimes we as entrepreneurs, we gloss over them until the last minute. And I say, Matt, I got a grand opening next week. I got people coming in for an open house. Do I need a waiver? Okay, so I know timing isn't good. What is the purpose and the process of a waiver?
And this kind of goes along with the question of like, do waivers actually work? All right. So the question is not, does a waiver actually work? The question really needs to be, do I actually need a waiver? So generally speaking, you have to have a waiver. A waiver of liability basically says that if you come into my gym and you get injured, you can't sue me for the injury that you sustained. Okay. The problem is if you don't have a waiver, you've just given your insurance company a great way to deny you coverage. So you're paying into this, $1 million, $2 million policy every year, and then you don't have it covered under a signed liability waiver. That insurance is going to be like, nope, you're done, because our policy requires you to have a waiver. Now, once we know, do we actually need a waiver? Yes, you do. Well, why do we have one? The waiver is to protect you against ordinary negligence. So to go against that question of do waivers actually work, there are two types of liability primarily. There's gross negligence and ordinary negligence. Gross negligence, you come into my gym, let's go back to CrossFit, okay? You came into my CrossFit gym and you said, I have a slipped disc in my back. And I go, oh, that's okay, Steven. We'll train you up. And then a month from now, I'm going to have you max effort 1 rep deadlift. Don't worry about that slipped disc. It'll be just fine. You go and you try to pull the deadlift. That becomes a massively ruptured disc. Yeah. You got to go get surgery now. I could potentially be liable for that because I knew you were injured. I should have known that a max effort deadlift was going to hurt you. I disregarded that information. I told you to do it anyway. That's gross negligence, or could be. No, when people are like, waivers don't work against gross negligence because you as a professional are responsible to not do anything that is going to increase the chances of getting your clients hurt. On the flip side, most of us probably are going to have some sort of exercise facility. If you're like a music school, this may not apply too much to you, but your business has some sort of inherent danger to it. Okay. If you own gymnastics, you've got things that people can fall off of and trip over. If you own a CrossFit gym, you got things that people can fall off of, trip over, drop on themselves, etc. There's inherent dangers to this that is ordinary to the operations of your business. That's what your liability waiver is there to protect against. So if I go into a gymnastics gym or cheerleading gym or whatever, and I trip over the mat and I've signed a waiver acknowledging that the premises is dangerous, well, that's ordinary. Like I should have known that there was a mat there. I should be walking where I'm going. Maybe the gym has some sort of like warnings or painted pink strips or whatever. And I still tripped. The gym now has a great argument that they're not negligent for that. So yes, you need a waiver. And those are a couple of reasons why.
So one of the things that has come up in my business is if you have insurance and you have waivers and you never make a mistake, you think you're never going to get sued and you're never going to have to pay a lawsuit, which I found out. So I used to get into, arguments with my insurance company all the time and saying, don't pay that. That wasn't our fault. I mean, we didn't do that, but that's not always how the insurance company decides on what they're paying. And sometimes the defense of a suit isn't worth winning. I've learned that, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have it. By the way, my doctor, the reason he told me to stop my CrossFit workouts was due to the term max. He says at 70 years old, you shouldn't be doing anything to max.
At 42 years old, I don't do very much to max anymore. There was an age for that.
Yeah, it's a great program, but most of what I deal with are sports training. And when you the competitive sports training, almost every sport is progressive, meaning that every sport you go into, it's going to get harder all the time in order to get better scores. So there's literally more chance of injury the better you are because you're doing tougher things.
You're doing more stuff.
One of the things that I don't see enough, I don't know if you get involved in this. I'm just starting to get involved in this. And this is coaches training. And my coaches training is on my backgrounds in teaching and how you teach things and how you communicate. But do you ever take time to explain to staff how they should talk? Like the person that says, I have a disc problem, and you don't want to say, well, this won't hurt it. I just think sometimes better communication with staff would help us avoid things, but maybe we have to get a better legal opinion before we start doing it. Maybe a webinar with you, or I don't know if you do that or not. But that's something where we could get a staff together, or we're doing it with owners in the event in December in Orlando, where Matt's going to say, okay, here's the things we need to do. So the owners are going to get this course but then it's got to go down to staff as well.
Yeah, we've offered to do things like that in the past for gyms. We haven't really formalized that consultant program, if you will, but there's nothing that says I'd be happy to. I'd love to be able to do that. I think the gyms that we primarily work with are owner operated, to the sense that the owners are still probably the primary staff member with a couple of ancillary part-timers. So they're in there enough that they feel like they can control it enough. They don't really see the benefit to something like me coming in there and talking to their staff. Whereas we get more and more into usually the kid activity centers, the swim schools, the cheerleading schools, the gymnastics schools, the music schools. Those are a little bit more owner separated, where the owner has basically hired a general manager, and that general manager is the one that's controlling everything. Presumably there's a larger opportunities you've identified in those sorts of areas in the future. We just don't get a lot of demand for it.
One of the talks that I give is entitled, "It's Not Your Grandfather's Gym Anymore." So things are different, and the sports world is a very complex business, and there's kinds of equity investing, and there's franchising and licensing, and there's so much going on. I think I don't want to say foolish, but it's somewhat foolish to go into it not educating yourself on all the possibilities. You say, well, I don't need that. I'm not a franchise. I'm not going to license my product. And I'm just saying, maybe not yet. But
yeah,
our good friend Lynn Ledford, who bought a gym a bunch of years ago without the plan of licensing a brand out, and now she is and has over 200 licensees, and all of a sudden legal structure and process is important. Before we go, is there, other than a waiver, when someone signs up, when we get a new member, is there any other discussion, legal or otherwise, that you see that maybe we should or shouldn't have?
Yeah. The other sort of legal thing that we want to make sure gets put in place is some sort of payment authorization form. Most gyms or most sports related facilities, membership-based facilities, are taking some kind of auto recurring payment. So I don't have to bill you every month. You've given me a credit card, ACH transaction, whatever. And I just tell you either on the 1st, the 15th, or the anniversary date every month, I'm going to hit you for your payment. I just call that a membership contract. And then when I say the word membership, people are like, well, we do tuition. Okay, fine. And people are like, we don't have contracts. Well, technically you do, because you're agreeing to pay me for money and I'm agreeing to provide you a service. And by legally, that's a contract. There's state laws depending on what state you're in, and there's federal laws that are going to apply across the board to everybody that says if you're going to do some sort of automatic recurring payment like that, there's all kinds of authorizations and terms and cancellations and things that you have to have in writing, and either your client or the parents of your client have to acknowledge. So that's the other thing that we see a big hole in, especially if the age of the studio is like really old and like more than 10 years old, because these are more recent laws. They may not have some sort of formal written document authorizing recurring payments, and that's something we need to fix.
So the good news is most of our businesses no longer have outstanding receivables. That was a thing when I started. A lot of our membership was people walk in with a check once a month and you can count on them showing up. So that's a good thing. A lot of the schools are doing recurring monthly. You never have to re-up. You only have to, opt out. It's kind of like signing up for something on the internet that you're paying for forever until you opt out. Can I say, okay, you can only opt out every 6 months, or are there laws against that?
Depending on what state you're in, there may be laws against that. Generally speaking, there aren't. As long as you jump through the additional hoops that your state may require you to jump through, then you're okay sort of locking people in for 6 months or a year. Just understand that there's a bunch of business headaches that are going to come along with trying to force people to pay for a particular period of time. And in the industries that we're in, it's not worth us cost-benefit analysis to go after these people if 4 months into a 6-month agreement, they're like, I'm not going to pay you anymore. What are you going to do about it? You're not going to sue your members. It's not going to be worth it.
I address the customer service marketing side of it all the time. And I was just curious, and it does cross over into legal, but at times it pays to refund people because of the 200 people they know. So Matt, we're running out of time here. Time always flies. I will ask you to come back on. I appreciate it.
Of course.
If someone wants to get a hold of you and they say, hey, Matt, I got a question, or I'd like to schedule a meeting, or I'd like to hire you to help me with this, How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. The easiest way is just to go to the website, jimlawyers.com. There's calls to action all over the website. If you put in your personal information, like one of those calls to action, it'll automatically forward you over to my scheduling calendar. You can grab 45 minutes with me and it'll be with me. I don't, I have like an associate and a director of operations, but I'm the main guy. And that's the easiest way to do it.
One of the things that I share, a lot of my clients, I refer over to Matthew, not only because they get good advice, but it's fairly priced. So those that are thinking, I can't afford a lawyer, it's really not. It's one of those, there's costs in your business that you have to have and you have to pay for, but it's not extraordinary compared to what it could cost you if you don't prepare yourself. So when we talk in December, we're going to dig into a little bit more. And anybody who's coming will get to meet with Matt personally. He's going to be there for 3 days. He's going to talk with you. You get, out of the course conversations as well.
Yeah.
But you can see how you can actually save and benefit your money, your business. And when you go to sell, a properly run business has a higher value. So
anyway. You and I both know that.
So thank you very much. Any last comments or?
No, this was great. I mean, it's hard to just sort of gloss over some of this stuff. It's real easy to get out into the weeds. So I'm happy to come back on and go into the weeds on anything you want me to go into. If you get a bunch of questions, always a pleasure.
We'll ask the listeners to email me with any questions you have for Matt, and we'll put together a little questionnaire. And when we bring Matt back on, we'll direct it specifically to the questions that we get. These were some that were in my mind, so I appreciate you addressing those.
Sure.
And we'll dig in deeper next time.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Paradigm Playbook. Explore more at ParadigmPlaybook.com. Want to be a playmaker? Contact StephenJCook.com. Share this episode to spread the word about sports industry opportunities. See you next week.